Okay, welcome to the second lecture of the OpShin Pioneer Program in week 1. And in this lecture I will guide you through setting up our development environment. So there are two parts to this development environment on Cardano. One is you have to have a setup for your language, which is for Python any integrated development environment basically. And then you need a setup to access the blockchain. And yeah, today I will show you the primary recommended. There are many ways to connect to the Cardano blockchain, but I will show you the recommended setup option that we will just be using throughout the program because it's the easiest to get started with. Yeah, the development environment for writing code is completely local on your computer, but for interacting with the Cardano testnet, so we will not connect to the mainnet for now. We will just connect to a testnet. There are several testnets, but any of them, it doesn't really matter which you connect to for now. And we will using an API service by a website called Blockfrost. These services are free for new developers, and yeah, that's why we just recommend using this, because it's really straightforward to get started with. There are also other setups that might be interesting. For example, you can run on remote infrastructure provided by Demeter.run. For example, you can run code on infrastructure provided by Demeter.run, which is a website for. I can just show you this here. This is the website, and Demeter.run provides some very simple API to get started with services like Kupo and Ogmios. However, we found that they are not always 100% reliable or fit for your exact purpose. So we will just start with Blockfrost. This is the website for Blockfrost. And is there anything missing for the introduction? Right, if you prefer a completely local setup, this is also possible. As I mentioned, this Ogmios tool, there is by now some good tools to completely set up a local development testnet, like Yahtzee, the Yahtzee dev kit. This runs you through setting up a Docker container and then just starting it, funding some addresses, and running completely against this local development environment. I can highly recommend using this because also testnets are sometimes broken or don't perform in the way you want. Or, for example, this development testnet produces new blocks every second instead of every 20 seconds, which makes it much easier to quickly iterate. So yeah, or you go and follow directly the instructions of the Ogmios website for setting up a server. So there are a number of options, but we will, yeah, I will go more into depth in later in this week. Or not actually me, but you can find more details on this in the original Plutus Pioneer program, or if you just go to the go to the websites that I will just provide as a link in the description. But as I said, for now we focus on Block first. And for this I will just quickly just click on dashboard, then you enter an email address, for example blockfrost@opshin.dev. Confirm that you are not a robot. And then you'll get an email in a second. And then clicking on this email, you get a new project, a completely new website, which is already in the starter plan, and you have up to 50,000 requests in a day, which if you do only manual debugging, you will probably not exceed. Then click on Add Project, choose one of the testnets, which is pre-prod or preview. We usually work on pre-prod. Right now there is a fork on pre-prod, so it's not so easy to work against, so you can just use preview. Call this the OpShin Pioneer. The name here, it really doesn't matter, it's just for you. So you know what this is used for. And then save the project. And now you get the project ID. This is a key that you can use later to authenticate against Blockfrost that you have a valid account. And yeah, actually I will show you right now on how we can use this key when we interact with the repository. So we navigate to set up the rest of the programming. We go to the OpShin Pioneer Program and we clone the code. And then open a terminal. I usually clone my code into Git. And then clone this into, I will clone this into a different folder, but you can just omit this last argument. So git clone, then the the link to the Pioneer program. You can either use the SSH or the HTTPS, it doesn't really matter. If you have but SSH really only if you have SSH set up, otherwise use the HTTPS. So maybe for demonstration purposes this is better. And then I will just call this the demo OpShin Pioneer Program. And then go into this folder. Now we have to install Poetry. This is the tool we use for managing dependencies on Python. The installation is usually quite straightforward. And yeah, on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, you can just copy this line of code and run it here. First, ideally, you create a virtual environment of Python. Then you run source venv bin activate. Make sure that your Python version is new enough. If your Python version is below 3.8, you will find it troublesome to install the correct version. There are tools for managing Python versions such as pyenv. So if your computer installation, if the system version of pyenv of the Python is below 3.8, check out pyenv, and yeah, you can read the documentation. It's quite straightforward to set up, and then make sure to create a virtual environment where the Python version, Python 3 management version, is 3.10. Okay. Just make this a bit larger. Okay, so to recap, you basically ran git clone, went into this directory, then create a virtual environment, source it. Now you run this install command from the Poetry website. And now we have Poetry installed. Should read what's here, then they tell us to export this. In my case it's ZSHRC, this depends on your shell. Let's try this again. Restart the shell, source, and then we have Poetry. And now, as I mentioned, we are in the Pioneer Program folder, so we run Poetry install to install all the dependencies. That's it. And we create a file called .env. There should be there is no .env template, but just call it .env. Call it blog first. Create a new variable here, project ID, and there we copy this project ID from Dogfrost, paste it in here. And now we run Poetry shell to enter the virtual environment. In this case, nothing happens because we have created the virtual environment ourselves already. But yeah, you can also decide to not install Poetry into the virtual environment, and then you will get a new environment. Okay. Now, check that you have written the .env file correctly. And now you can run into source week 01 and then run scripts, check setup, and you should see this last block slot. And you can also already see in your dashboard that you have a request made. Right, there are different explorers for the Cardano blockchain. For example, the C Explorer. And here you can see that the latest block slot is 4771728, and here it's 808. So yeah, here 24. This is the block that we get reported from Dogfrost. By now it's actually this block, and yeah, this is actually the latest block. The same if you have preprod. If you're using preprod network, you use here instead preprod.cexplorer.block. And if you use mainnet, you can just remove this. You will see all the blocks. There's also Cardano scan, which provides you the same information. If you navigate to blocks here, you can see the latest blocks. And here I think you have to navigate to see the absolute slot. Also here exists preview.cardanoscan.io. And yeah, you have to navigate into this to see the absolute slot. Okay, we hope that this helps you already with this leaves you with a working setup. If you are struggling with any of the instructions that we provided, feel free to open an issue or join in the OpShin server Discord to ask any questions. And note also that if you are trying to use Ogmios, there are different versions of Ogmios, 5 and 6 in particular, and the current version of PyCardano, as of the time of this video, only supports Ogmios 5, but there is a Python implementation for Ogmios to add Ogmios support 6. This, as of me speaking, not yet part of the Pioneer program, but might be added later. So, for example, if you use the Yahtzee dev kit, this relies on Ogmios version 6 and will thus not work with our instructions. That said, if you're interested in the solution, please raise an issue and we will look into adding it. Anyways, with this boring part now out of the way, we hope that this didn't take up too much time for you, and we are looking forward to welcome you again in next week's lecture on smart contract development itself. As mentioned before, we also recommend looking into the alternative setup options in the Bluetooth DX Pioneer program if you are if you're having any trouble setting up. And anyways, it's good to know all the different ways to interact with the blockchain. We do not replicate the other setups because they are basically this connecting to the blockchain part is independent of which programming language you use, and in particular the programming language itself does not need the node, but only when we try to deploy the contracts or interact with the chain. All right, thank you, and the next video will introduce you to the homework for this week, and see you there.